Good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi Schwartz. We start with breaking news tonight from the Middle East. The U.S. and the UK have launched strikes against targets in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. That's according to two U.S. officials who say it is with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands. The countries used fighter jets and Tomahawks fired from Navy ships to hit their targets. Moments ago, President Biden said the operation was in response to the growing violence in the Red Sea, where Houthi militants have attacked at least 27 commercial shipping vessels in the last few months. Biden concluded by saying he will not hesitate to do more if necessary. Houthi militants confirmed that the capital city of Sana'a was hit. It is the first time the U.S. has struck land-based targets since tensions began escalating in the Red Sea. The Iranian-backed militant group has already responded to the attacks, vowing that the U.S. will pay and doubling down on rhetoric saying that they, the Houthis, are maintaining a position in the Red Sea to support Gaza in the Israel-Hamas war. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cuby joins us now with more. Courtney, what can you tell us about these strikes? Should we expect to see more in the coming days and even hours?
So we shouldn't rule out that there will be more, especially if the Houthis continue with these attacks. Now, we've seen at least 27 attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea and into the Bab el-Mandeb, which is that narrow waterway down in the southern Red Sea. And why that is so critical is it is impacting shipping. Major companies are announcing that they are going to avoid the area, which is adding cost, it's adding time, and ultimately that could start impacting consumers. Now, we know to date, since these attacks began on November 19th, there have been at least 27 of them, but there have been more than 80 projectiles launched by Houthis in that part of Yemen. That includes ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, and a lot of one-way attack drones. The majority of them have either been shot down or simply have landed in the water there, but several have impacted some of these commercial ships. That led the U.S. to join this defensive maritime coalition. They call it Operation Prosperity Guardian. It started on December 18th, and that is sort of patrolling those waterways, trying to defend against these attacks, but they have continued. There was one even today, Ellison. The U.S. also came together with a coalition of 14 nations last week, putting out a statement condemning the Houthi actions and threatening exactly what we saw here tonight, which was retaliatory strikes. Now, we don't have a whole lot of specific information about what they hit in Yemen tonight, beyond the fact that they went after some warehouses or storage facilities, some launchers, and maybe some other locations. We're still waiting to get what the military calls the battle damage assessment. We should get more as the hours go on. But again, the U.S. using and the British military using fighter jets and the U.S. launching Tomahawk missiles from U.S. Navy ships at a number of targets in the Houthi-controlled area of Yemen tonight, Ellison.
Courtney, when we're talking about Yemen and the Red Sea, there are layers to the issue when it comes to the United States' involvement here, right? In terms of Yemen and the civil war and the fights that have been going on there for decades, in a lot of ways, those fights have been seen as sort of a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran for who has more control within the region. The United States in the past has supported Saudi Arabia in those fights. But then, if I'm not mistaken, in 2021, President Biden kind of had a reversal where he said the United States would no longer support Saudi-led coalition's offensive actions in Yemen. At the same time, we're talking about the Red Sea. We're talking about an incredibly important global trade route that has been called by some the I-95 of the planet. So when we're looking at this and all these different factors from the U.S. military standpoint, what is at stake here?
Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15% of the world's global trade flows through that area. And you're absolutely right about the extremely complex and dynamic issues in that region. Now, remember, the Houthi rebels are trained, supported, backed, and supplied by Iran. Why that's really important to point out, and you know this from your time in Israel, Ellison, when there were times where the Israelis and the Palestinians, and Hamas, really, when the Israelis and Hamas, when they agreed to a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire, some of the other proxy groups that are backed by Iran stopped their activities. In Iraq, in Syria, we stopped seeing attacks against the bases with Americans during that time. But interestingly enough, the Houthis continued, even though they are also again, backed by Iran. What's important to point out here is that the U.S., the U.K., and these additional nations that help support these missions tonight, none of this happened in a vacuum. You can guarantee that before they decided to take these specific strikes tonight, they considered the potential repercussions here. They considered how potentially Iran may react to this, not just the Houthis. What we'll be watching for in the coming hours and days, frankly, is to see how the Houthis react, how Iran reacts to this, if they put out a statement, if they condemn it, and see if Houthi attacks in the Red Sea against maritime in the area continues. But I got to say, Ellison, I would not rule out that if, in fact, these Houthi attacks continue and maybe even accelerate, I would not rule out continuing strikes by this coalition.
All right, Courtney Kube at the Pentagon, thank you so much. Let's turn now to NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, you have spent so much time reporting in this region throughout your career. Talk to us about what you're hearing from sources and what you make of this tonight. Was this operation a surprise to any global security experts or people in that sphere? Was it a surprise to the Houthis?
It was not a surprise, Ellison, to the Houthis, to anyone who's been watching this. The U.S., the U.K. have been really telegraphing over the last couple of days that these strikes were coming. We have seen American and British warships moving into position in the Red Sea. We've seen phone calls between the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and his British, Australian counterparts. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been here in the region over the last week. His focus on the war in Gaza, but also about preventing that conflict from spreading into a wider war across the region. And he was very, very clear that there would be consequences if these Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea continued. I would say, Ellison, what has been surprising is the Houthis' defiance that the U.S., its allies, have been edging closer and closer to these strikes. They have been giving the Houthis a chance to de-escalate. And instead, yesterday, according to the British and American militaries, we saw the largest, most complex attack on commercial shipping in the Red Sea, involving 18 drones, involving missiles. And that is a sign that the Houthis not backing down. Tonight, they are defiant once again. They say that their operations will continue. Remember, these missile attacks, they say, are in response to Israeli strikes in Gaza. They say this is all an act of solidarity with the Palestinian people, and they say that they will respond. And the question now, Ellison, is where and when, and does this lead to further escalation?
Raf, if you can remind us who the Houthis are. I mean, they really first emerged as this sort of resistance group in the 1990s, right? But then at some point, and they're Shiite Muslims, they were arguably radicalized and became very anti-America, anti-U.S. interests during the Iraq War. How do they sort of exist today in the last decade? And in terms of their influence in the region, as well as their military or just weapons strength, how big of a deal are they?
So, yeah, as you said, they've been around for decades, but they really surged to global prominence in 2015 when they swept into the capital of Yemen, Sana'a. They took it over. They control much of western Yemen. They won it in the civil war against the internationally backed government of Yemen. And Saudi Arabia, as you were saying earlier when you were talking with Courtney, swung into action. It sent its fairly advanced American armed military to fight what looked like a kind of ragtag Yemeni rebel group. Their aesthetic, Ellison, if you will, is Houthi leaders tend to appear on TV with a sword, a small sword tucked into their belts. They look like something from the 19th century, but they proved to be a very, very resilient fighting group. And they basically fought the Saudis to a standstill over the course of 9 years of conflict. And during the Civil War, they have advanced and developed their weapons systems, their missiles, their drones, a lot of it with help from Iran, from other members of the so-called Axis of Resistance, these Iranian-backed militant groups across the region, in Iraq, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And it is those fairly advanced missiles that we are seeing being fired at the ships in the Red Sea. Some of them have been fired towards Israel. None of them have actually made it that far, but they are a force to be reckoned with, and it is not at all clear that these strikes will cause them to back down. Alison?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Raf. I mean, at this point, do we know if the strikes that have been carried out this evening by the U.S. and the U.K., if they actually hit anything significant? If it was so well known, it seems, that these strikes were imminent, one would think Houthi rebels would have acted and moved their most valuable things out of the way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The Houthis have had time to move their missiles, to move their drones if they wanted to. And it may very well be that if the U.S. is not looking for escalation, they deliberately telegraphed this so the Houthis could get their people, get their most significant material out of the way. The U.S. could be seen to be carrying out strikes, but the strikes potentially more symbolic than they would be actually material. As you said, we just don't know at this point. We are seeing on social media these very large explosions in Sana'a and the port city of Hodeidah. We don't know exactly what was hit, but we do know that the Houthis certainly have not lost the will to fight. Whether they have lost the capability, we'll see when the sun comes up, when the dust clears, and we'll see if they start shooting at ships in the Red Sea, American bases in the region, oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of targets. Elsa?
NBC foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez on the ground in the Middle East. Thank you. Now let's turn to NBC's senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. He joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. So, Gabe, more than 24 strikes on commercial ships, commercial vessels. Roughly 20% of global trade has been disrupted throughout all of this. Is the U.S. and the U.K. just saying enough is enough here? What are you hearing from sources inside the White House tonight? Could we see more of these strikes moving forward?
Well, Allison, we expect to find out more information from the White House, hopefully, in just a short time. But the president, as you mentioned tonight, is out with that forceful statement talking about how these strikes are in direct response to those unprecedented Houthi attacks, as the president describes it. And let's put a part of that statement, and you see right there. And I want to draw your attention, Allison, to the last part of the statement, because it speaks to what Courtney was talking about earlier. These targeted strikes are a clear message that the U.S. and our partners will not tolerate attacks on our personnel or allow hostile actors to imperil freedom of navigation in one of the world's most critical commercial routes. I will not hesitate, the president says, to direct further measures to protect our people and free the flow of international commerce as necessary. You see right there, Allison, the president essentially teasing further measures, a warning, a repeated warning to the Houthis to stop these attacks, Allison.
You know, Gabe, the U.S. historically has had such an involvement in what's happened in Yemen, particularly following the civil war, as Raf was talking about in 2014, 2015, when we saw Houthi rebels really start to take control of key areas of northern Yemen. But then in February of 2021, Biden did sort of back off on the U.S.'s involvement in supporting the Saudi-led coalition as they were engaging in this fight with Houthi rebels. There are some people who are probably watching all of this tonight and just from a gut reaction level saying, oh, my goodness, are we about to see another Iraq, another Afghanistan? Is the United States going to be fully back, boots on the ground in the Middle East? When you're speaking with sources at the White House, are they ruling out further, more extensive military operations beyond just strikes from the air? Or is that something that seems to still be on the table here?
Well, Allison, the White House officials are not ruling out anything at this point. They have said, however, it is their intent, there are no plans to have any American boots on the ground at this point. But you bring up a very good point there in the sense that the challenge here is to prevent this from turning into a wider war. And we're just seeing that apparent new video from Yemen of one of those airstrikes. But, Allison, this is a very difficult fine line that the White House is trying to walk, how to deter the Houthis from further attacks without provoking them and Iran from escalating this conflict. Now, the stakes are very high for this region. You spoke about how critical the Red Sea is for commercial ships around the world. The president, in his statement tonight, mentioning that more than 2 1,000 ships have been forced to divert thousands of miles to avoid the Red Sea, and more than 50 nations have been affected in 27 attacks so far, as Courtney mentioned. So, Allison, it will be very interesting to see the response really from the region. We've already heard a Houthi response tonight. How will Iran respond to this? Still a lot of questions as the White House moves forward.
Absolutely. Gabe Gutierrez at the White House. Thank you. So we've been talking a lot about this as we're looking at the context of this breaking news and the United States, along with the UK, carrying out strikes inside of Yemen. They say strikes on targets related to Houthi rebels. It begs the question we were starting to talk about with all of our reporters a minute ago. Exactly who are the Houthis? It's a name you have probably heard a lot in recent weeks since the war between Israel and Hamas really kicked off. But our team, they have spoken to top leaders of the group, one who is pointing the finger at Israel for the growing conflicts and tensions in the region. Watch this report from NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel and learn more about the Houthis.
Well armed and undeterred by American and international threats, Yemeni militants known as the Houthis have disrupted traffic in the Red Sea, sent cargo prices skyrocketing, and could trigger a regional war. This week, the militants launched their biggest attack yet, firing more than 20 drones and missiles at commercial ships in the southern Red Sea, all shot down by U.S. and British warships deployed to protect the vital shipping lane. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warning the Houthis' actions would not be tolerated.
All I can tell you is that, as we made clear, and many other countries made clear, there'll be consequences for the Houthis' actions.
But who are the Houthis? They call themselves Ansar Allah, Arabic for followers of God. A rebel group backed by Iran, the militants took over northern Yemen in early 2015, including the capital Sana'a. Long at war with Saudi Arabia, which supports the old Yemeni government the militants overthrew, the Houthis burst onto the international stage after Hamas's October 7th attacks in Israel and Israel's devastating war of reprisal in Gaza. The once little-known militant group quickly began launching missiles and drones at Israel in solidarity with Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza. They released highly produced videos of their raids on commercial ships. While other Arab states have condemned Israel but not acted, the Houthis have seen their popularity soar in the Middle East. The group even opened one ship it captured to the public as a kind of museum. Companies including Maersk have already diverted all marine traffic from the Red Sea. The Houthis say they will stop their attacks as soon as Israel ends its war in Gaza. But has the group overplayed its hand? We spoke with Mohammed al-Buhaithi, one of the top Houthi leaders, by video link from the Yemeni capital Sana'a.
Do you really want a war with the United States and other countries right now?
لا نريد أي حرب مع أي طرف ونحن نريد السلام ولكن السلام العادل وليس السلام الذي تريده أمريكا لأن أمريكا تريد فرض هيمنتها على المنطقة ليس فقط على فلسطين.
Do you coordinate with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraqi groups, other, let's call them groups that are supported by Iran?
بالتأكيد هناك تنسيق بين دول محور المقاومة وهذا التنسيق هو في الموجهات العامة وليس في كل التفاصيل. وبالنسبة لنا في اليمن نحن بيننا تنسيق وبين المقاومة الفلسطينية ولكن في النهاية قرار كل دولة من دول محور المقاومة هو قرار مستقل.
By taking on the United States, do you think maybe you've taken on more than you can chew? A fight that is too big for your capacity?
نعم عندما نقوم بالحسبة المادية فهذا صحيح وإنما نتحرك بقوة الله سبحانه وتعالى ولذلك نحن سنتحرك من أجل نجدة إخواننا في فلسطين مهما كلفنا ذلك من تضحية.
Pressure is mounting on the United States to take military action against the Houthis. But that comes with the risk of further expanding war in the Middle East during one of the region's most volatile times in years.
Richard Engel, thank you. Don't go anywhere because we are just getting started tonight. After the break, Hunter Biden is back in court, this time in California. His pleas to felony tax charges and the potential jail time he's facing. Plus, round 3, or is it 4? Who can keep track? What to expect from another winter storm making its way from coast to coast? And a lesson in art history and the law. The decades-long court battle over a painting stolen by the Nazis, why it won't be returning to its original owner's family. That's all ahead, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Today, the Pentagon Inspector General said that they will review how the department handled Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's recent hospitalization. The hospitalization, due to a prostate cancer diagnosis, was not known by the White House and other top officials for days. The review will examine the DoD's policies and procedures about timely and appropriate notifications, as well as the transition of authorities when someone may have health issues or is otherwise unavailable. New York City officials have issued a vacate order for an illegally constructed underground tunnel connected to a synagogue complex where earlier this week chaos erupted and 9 people were arrested. An investigation revealed that the 60-foot tunnel was made without the approval of the Department of Buildings, who now say the buildings above the tunnel need to be stabilized. A Texas man was arrested outside of singer Shakira's home in Miami Beach this week. Authorities say the 56-year-old made several social media posts about the star and sent packages to her home. Here's what he told the judge in court this week.
Sir.
She's my wife. I speak to her all the time.
No, sir. No, sir. She is not your wife. She is not your wife.
After hearing that, the judge doubled his bond to $100,000. He was also ordered to stop sending packages and to stop trying to contact Shakira. Prices for things like food and gas rose more than expected in December, according to a new report from the Labor Department. The Consumer Price Index increased 0.3% for the month and 3.4% from a year ago. Much of the increase is because of rising shelter costs. And today, Microsoft dethroned Apple as the world's most valuable company briefly. The two have been trading places for years now, but at market close, Apple returned to the top spot. Microsoft's shares have risen sharply since last year due to the early lead the company has taken in artificial intelligence. Now to L.A., where hours ago Hunter Biden appeared in court pleading not guilty to all 9 tax charges he's facing, including multiple felonies. Federal prosecutors say Biden failed to pay more than $1 million in taxes between 2016 and 2019. Instead of paying taxes, he's accused of using that money to pay for a lavish lifestyle. Today's court appearance comes just one day after the younger Biden made a surprise appearance on Capitol Hill. House Republicans were meeting to recommend contempt charges against Biden for defying a congressional subpoena. NBC News correspondent David Noriega joins me now from Los Angeles with more. So, David, walk us through what happened in that L.A. courtroom today.
Hey, Ellison. So the alleged failure to pay taxes charged in this case stems from a period of time during which Hunter Biden, by his own admission, was in the depths of his addiction to alcohol and crack cocaine. Now, he and his legal team point out that he has since paid that tax debt in full and gotten sober. This is one of the reasons they say that this prosecution should not be happening in the first place. They say it's selective and politically motivated. That was what was behind their plea of not guilty that Biden entered in this federal courthouse behind me today. Now, as far as what happened in court today, it was a relatively straightforward hearing of about 30 minutes. The judge reminded Biden that he is being released on conditions that include regular testing for drugs and alcohol, and that if he fails to meet those conditions, there will be a warrant put out for his arrest. Probably the most important piece of news that came out of the hearing today is that the judge set a trial date of June 20th. So what a lot of us are looking at now is how exactly will this trial, it's hard to know exactly how long it will last, but how will or won't it intersect with election season this fall? Ellison?
So what comes next, and how does this case fit into all the other investigations, lawsuits, subpoenas, happenings on Capitol Hill as it relates to Hunter Biden?
So Hunter Biden currently faces two federal criminal cases, this one in California and one in Delaware related to his alleged lying on a federal form applying for a firearm. Now, that is separate from the investigation by House Republicans into what they allege is Hunter Biden's corrupt foreign business dealings. It's as part of that investigation that House Republicans are moving forward with trying to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress. That, if the full House of Representatives does in fact hold him in contempt of Congress, that might lead to further criminal charges against Hunter Biden, but it's not guaranteed to. Now, all of that is on top of a number of civil lawsuits that Biden is currently embroiled in. In some of them, he's a defendant, but in many of them, he's a plaintiff. This is part of a shift in his and his team's legal and PR strategy in recent months. They went from kind of lying low and trying not to bring attention to his troubles to taking a more aggressive approach that includes suing a number of the people that he says has gone after him. People like, for example, Rudy Giuliani. He has also sued the IRS, his father's IRS, for what he says was their failure to keep his tax data private. Allison?
All right, David Noriega, thank you for breaking all of that down. We appreciate it. Just hours ago, closing arguments wrapped in the New York civil fraud case against Donald Trump. The former president and his business, the Trump Organization, are accused of inflating the value of their properties and assets for years, all to secure more favorable loans. Trump faces a $370 million penalty and a lifetime ban on operating his real estate business in the state. He's repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, including outside of the courtroom earlier today.
They don't have one piece of paper. What we've run is a great company. That's been proven. Very highly successful company. This was a political witch hunt for election interference, but also for getting somebody elected because you wanted to get the publicity. It's a disgrace, and they should pay me damages.
NBC's Rahema Ellis joins us now. So, Rahema, walk us through what we heard from both sides in court today.
Well, Ellison, they were doing what they've done for the 3 months of this trial, drilling down on their arguments that we've heard before. But let me give you a sense of what the state was saying. The state, as you pointed out, was pointing out that they allege that the Trump administration, their financial statements for a decade from 2011 to 2021 were false statements. And they allege that favorable loans for the Trump organizations were presented under these false pretenses. As for the team, the Trump team, they counter that by saying no witnesses ever testified to any harm and that it was a victimless crime. But part of what the court is saying is that there does not have to be evidence of harm in order for laws to be broken. And now it's going to be up to the judge to make a decision about those things, including conspiracy and making false statements, as to whether or not this court will do what the prosecution is asking. As you point out, they want the Trump administration to pay something, not the administration, but the organization, pay something like $370 million in fines and be banned from life for doing real estate business in New York. Allison?
So the former president actually asked to speak during closing arguments. The judge originally said no, but then we saw Trump speak anyways. How did that happen, and what did he say?
It was a dramatic reversal of his decision, which had been a solid decision yesterday, where he said that the Trump team had not complied in a timely manner with whether or not they would stick to the guidelines for Trump making a statement. And that is, you can't make disparaging remarks about the clerk and the judge, and you can't use it as a platform for campaigning. Well, the judge changed his mind this morning, but told him, do it within 5 minutes. In that 5 minutes, Trump, in a very rushed way, said the very things that the judge had asked him not to do, including saying that the legal scholars looking at this case find it's disgraceful, this is a fraud, and he talked about the attorney general. He said the person in the room right now hates Trump. As for the judge he went after, he said, I know this is boring to you. I know you have your own agenda. They should pay me, meaning Trump, for what we've gone through in terms of reputation and else. So exactly what he was asked not to do, he did. At one point, the judge said to Trump's attorneys, control your client. After that, Trump left the stand and the defense portion of this ended. Ellison?
Wow. And that judge, he also had some sort of bomb threat this morning at his house. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. And it almost set the tone, if you will, for the drama and the upset that occurred in this court today. There was a bomb threat, allegedly, according to authorities, at the home of the judge. They did not find any evidence of a bomb. We don't know for sure if the judge was at his home or not. We know, however, that it did have an impact on what happened here because the court was delayed for a while this morning before it could get started because authorities wanted to check and make certain that everything here would be safe. Ellison?
Rahima Ellis, thank you. For more on all of this, NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. So, Danny, let's start with what Rahima was just talking about. What do you make of former President Trump's remarks today?
What do I make of them? I mean, they never should have been made in the first place. That's the part that really astonishes me, is that former President Trump was even given the opportunity to speak. I mean, I understand this is a high-profile trial. I understand the judge is under a lot of pressure, but that's what happens. Going back to the OJ case, high-profile cases make judges do things they wouldn't ordinarily do and give concessions to parties, usually defendants, they wouldn't dream of doing within just a regular run-of-the-mill defendant that nobody's ever heard of, that's in and out of the courthouse 1,000 times a day. In other words, if I had made a motion for my represented client to give a speech in my own closing argument, that motion would have been denied 100% of the time. So procedurally, I'm not even entirely sure what happened here. And in a sense, the court and everybody learned exactly why we don't let plaintiff or clients get up and speak during proceedings, because of exactly what happened here. Things can go off the rails. That's why we have lawyers to keep everything on the rails. And, you know, this is exactly what would have happened if you let Trump speak. I don't know who was surprised here. The judge couldn't have been surprised at what Donald Trump said and did.
I guess that gets us to our next question. I mean, why would his legal team allow this? It sounds very clearly to me like you were saying this did not help them or their case moving forward. Why would they even put him in a position to be able to speak? Do they just not have control of their client, which is kind of what the judge seemed to imply?
Well, the answer to my first question was based on the judge and what made him decide to do that. But you're exactly right. It also raises the question of why did the defense team want to do this? And I think you answered your question within your question. I think if you're signing on to be part of Trump's legal team, baked into the deal is that the client's going to do what the client wants to do. And in fact, that's kind of baked into the deal with most lawyers, but you can choose to decline to represent a client. I think lawyers who decide to represent Trump know that to some degree he's going to be making requests like this. Now, in terms of risk aversion, I have to imagine his lawyers warned him, hey, this is probably not a good idea. We had a couple experts. We had the Deutsche Bank folks. They did pretty well on the stand. Maybe it's not a great idea for you to irritate the judge and leave the last thing in his mind being how annoying you were and how much you annoyed the judge on the front end of the trial. I mean, that was months ago, Ellison. We'd almost forgotten how Donald Trump had been such an irritant in that courtroom. And then he gets up there and for 5 minutes, he effectively undoes all the good his attorneys may have done for him and totally gets the judge remembering what a pain this party was from the beginning of the case.
So then talk to us about what you see in terms of the overall case here, because this is a case that involves the Trump organization. You have the case against Donald Trump. There's also the cases against his sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr. How do you think everything is shaking out when you look at the totality of these cases?
This is the rare case where we've gotten a preview because of two very unusual factors. Number one, summary judgment was granted. And that's not that unusual, but it was granted in favor of the plaintiff. And most summary judgment motions are not granted. So that means the judge has already taken away half of this case, deciding it in favor of the AG. And the other very unusual factor is that this was a judge-only trial. So in other words, you have that rare instance where you get a sneak peek at what the judge thinks, and then the judge is the one who decides the rest of the case. Ordinarily, that's the jury that decides what's remaining for trial after a summary judgment decision is issued. So, and that even further raises the question of why in the world would you call Trump at the end of your case when you're pitching it to a fact finder, and that same person that you've gotten into something of a bickering match with in court is the one that's going to go back into his chambers and now write an opinion deciding your fate. A lot of things don't make a lot of sense here.
All right, NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos, thank you. We appreciate it. Coming up, end of an era. Bill Belichick calling it a career with the New England Patriots. Why the six-time Super Bowl winning head coach might not be ready to put his playbook away just yet. But first, you gotta see this. All aboard the Elvis Express. Sydney's Central Station in Australia was filled with a lot of blue suede shoes and, yes, sideburns. The Elvis impersonators took the train to a small farming town for an annual 5-day festival for the King of Rock and Roll. There will be impersonation competitions and, of course, musical tributes. They look like they are having a blast. That train ride to Graceland is going to be a long one. We will be right back. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. In California, the Palisades Tahoe ski resort reopened on high alert today. Yesterday, an avalanche killed one person and injured 3 others. It was the first avalanche fatality of this winter season in the United States. In Japan, the Los Angeles Dodgers star pitcher Shohei Ohtani visited the U.S. Embassy. He met with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, who presented the baseball player with a supersized visa for his dog. Last month, Ohtani, the 2-time American League MVP, signed with the LA-based team for a 10-year, $700 million contract. The city doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just a lot of money. Some of California's most famous diplomats could be on their way back home to the Golden State. I'm talking, of course, about these giant pandas who were on loan at the San Diego Zoo for decades, but were returned to China a few years ago. Recently, China expressed an openness to send them back to California, but San Francisco's mayor has now made it clear San Diego can't get them back without a fight. Yet another major winter storm is brewing tonight, bringing with it more snow, rain, and wind across the Midwest to the Northeast. This storm is expected to be so intense it will reach levels of a bomb cyclone, which is a storm that intensifies very rapidly. Blizzard conditions are expected, and some areas could see as much as 12 to 18 inches of snow through Saturday. For the Northeast, this means even more rain and risks of flooding. States like New Jersey are still trying to recover from storms earlier this week that brought destructive flooding to homes and businesses. And the South is also facing severe weather alerts tomorrow, with risks of more high winds, hail, and tornadoes. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with more. Hey, Bill.
Well, good evening to you, Ellison, and here we go again. This huge storm is beginning to intensify, and just like the last one, we're going to have blizzard conditions, we're going to have severe weather, maybe even tornadoes, flooding, damaging winds. The storm has it all, and behind this one, brutal cold, too. So let's get into it. Storm is beginning to break out. You can see the blue on the map is where the snow's starting here in areas of Nebraska and Kansas. We'll eventually start to get some thunderstorms pushing through Texas. That'll be during the overnight hours. If we get any severe storms, likely after midnight. And look at this colorful map with all the areas that are winter alerts. So the white is advisories, watches are in blue, blizzard warnings are in purple. So those are the ones that catch my attention. And we go straight here into Iowa, only days before the Iowa caucus, and most of the state is under a blizzard warning. Winter storm warnings from Green Bay to Milwaukee to Chicago, also including Omaha. And so we're expecting a very high impact event throughout this region in the next 24 hours with howling winds. Snowfall totals, they're not going to be blockbuster, not record breaking, but we will see the possibility of a foot of snow somewhere in northern Illinois, the southern half of Wisconsin, and also northern portions of Michigan. Much of Iowa will be somewhere around a half a foot, maybe as much as 10 inches. Then the severe weather side. So this is late tonight, mostly going to be damaging winds that are possible. I think Dallas and Oklahoma City, you should be okay. But East Texas into Louisiana and Little Rock, you'll probably hear the storms going through during the overnight hours. Early tomorrow morning, we continue this threat through Mississippi, and then we push it right through the entire South. These are the same areas that got hit with the last storm with the severe weather. This time, though, it looks like a lower chance of strong tornadoes. We'll still get a couple tornadoes, but we shouldn't hopefully have any big ones. Fingers crossed. You never know, but this is the area of concern. So it's pretty much all of the southeast, and we're not really including much of the peninsula of Florida in this. And then this storm doesn't have the 2 to 4 inches of rain like the last one. This is more like 1 inch, maybe at worst case, up to 1.5 inches to 2 inches. The ground is saturated. The rivers are already flooding. Everywhere you see the red polygons, that's where we have current rivers that are flooding. So we're going to add this to that situation, and that's why we have flood watches that are up now the entire I-95 corridor. That's going to be Friday afternoon in the mid-Atlantic, Friday evening heading up into the northeast, and then clearing out by pretty early Saturday morning. And behind the storm, it's already brutally cold. I mean, the temperatures are ridiculous right now in Montana, and that's what's going to push all the way down to Texas by the time we get to the tail end of the weekend. So we do have wind chill warnings in place. That's where it's dangerous to have exposed skin even for a short amount of time. Here's the current wind chill. Oh, Great Falls, -42. That's one of the coldest wind chills we've seen all winter long. And this cold air is heading south, already -10 in North Platte. So you get air this cold on the backside of this blizzard. The snow is going to be blowing all over the place. So here's the wind chill forecast as we head through the upcoming weekend. Denver, -16, -19. Kansas City, -17. We got a football game being played in Kansas City Saturday night, -17 wind chills. And even Dallas by the time we get to Sunday. And of course, Allison, with what happened in Texas a couple winters back, everyone's going to be watching closely how that power grid does when the cold air arrives this weekend.
Bill Cairns, thank you. Turning now to a stunning decision by a California court that has roots back to World War II. Lily Kasherer was a Jewish woman who lived in Berlin in 1939, the same year most of the world declared war on Germany. In a last-ditch effort to get out of the city, Lily surrendered a Camille Pissarro painting to the Nazis for an exit visa. After a few decades, that painting found its way to a museum in Spain, where it's lived for the last 8 years. A federal appeals court ruled the museum can keep the painting despite the Kasherer's family's efforts to get it back. But Lily's great-grandson, David, says they're not giving up just yet. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin joins us now with more. So, Dana, walk us through all of this trial, and why the court ultimately decided that this museum in Spain has the right to keep this painting.
Yeah, so Ellison, this Nazi art theft case began in 2005 and reached the Supreme Court just 2 years ago. So the two sides have disputed whether this U.S. federal law or Spanish law applies to this case. But on Tuesday, a 3-judge panel ruled in favor of the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum to keep the piece. Now, under Spanish law, if the museum had known the art was stolen by the Nazis at the time of purchase, they would have to return it. But the Museum Foundation says they couldn't have known. Well, the family argues that the museum had to have known, and they say they have evidence showing a sanded-off sticker on the back of the frame, which denotes that it belonged to the Kassirer family in Berlin, Ellison.
So, Dana, how did this family actually track this painting down and learn the entire story behind it?
Yeah, so the grandson of Lily Kassirer said his father had been looking for it after seeing it in a family photo showing that painting hanging over his grandmother's sofa. He shared the photo with a friend who later discovered that painting in the Madrid Museum. And this kicked off this nearly 2 decades-long legal fight to get it back. And if you're wondering what the family would do with it, well, the painting isn't being sought for sentimental reasons, but to help others. Listen.
What would that mean for you and your family to get this painting back?
It would allow us to help others, which my parents were very involved with their whole lives, and they would expect me to do the same. I'm almost 70, and I haven't got that much time left. So I would like to have a legacy where I'm helping others. This painting needs to be sold for that purpose. It needs to be sold for the highest bidder in an auction or something similar, in order to get everything we can for it, in order to establish this foundation that I promised to my father, so we could help other people.
They also want to prevent Spain from, in the family's words, from becoming a breeding ground for stolen art. Ellison?
Dana Griffin, thank you. The end of an era in the NFL and for a generation of fans in New England.
So appreciative of fans for all the support they've given me, my family, and this football team. And it's with just so many fond memories and thoughts that I think about the Patriots, and I'll always be a Patriot. I look forward to coming back here, but at this time, we're gonna move on.
With just 4 wins, Coach Bill Belichick leaves Foxborough Stadium after suffering through the worst season of his career. But he leaves behind an all-time great record, 24 seasons as the head coach of the Patriots, 296 total wins and 6 Super Bowl titles, more than any other coach. Much of that success came with one quarterback, Tom Brady. The former MVP writing to his former coach on Instagram, quote, "I could never have been the player I was without you." NBC Sports host Corey Robinson joins me now with more. Okay, Corey, I mean,
that was kind of nice.
That was nice. I'm a little surprised because they had a bit of tension there at the end, which we can get into all of this. But were you surprised to see this happen? And let's just talk sort of about the immediate why, and do we think he actually ends up with another team?
Yeah, I mean, you missed the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. That's not the Patriot standard. We've seen that this team has no sentiment, they have no emotional feelings towards past legends. They've let everyone. They've been so cold and calculating. So you kind of understand. Why would Bill Belichick be any different? I think the difference, though, is what happened with Tom Brady. They let him walk away, right? And let him go where he wanted to go. Same thing with Bill Belichick. He had 1 year left on his contract, reportedly. They didn't trade. They say, we're not going to put him on the trading block and get something back. You've done enough for our organization. Just walk away. And I think that was really nice.
What is the reaction among Patriot fans? I have to ask because my best friend of all time is a Patriots fan. And I always say, she is the best human, best friend. Only flaw is she's a Patriots fan.
Yeah, look, I think right now it's an interesting thing. Like I said, when you've won that much, the past couple of years have been basically intolerable. 13 losses in a season. They win so much. So the thing about this team right now is, okay, obviously they need to make a change. And Belichick was the change. Now, from my perspective, it's interesting. Where does Bill go? So does he end up going to the Falcons right now? I just checked the Falcons head coach tracker. His name is not on there. People have been linking him. Potentially he goes over there. I personally watched that 2019 NFL top 100 of all time. He was on set with Rich Eisen and Chris Collinsworth, cracking jokes with Lawrence Taylor and talking with Roger Staubach. I thought TV might be interesting for him because, we saw Tom Brady sign that 10-year contract, made more money than he ever did playing football, just immediately, guaranteed money with Fox. I think that Bill Belichick is an encyclopedia for football knowledge. If he decides to come back and coach, though, it'll be his 50th season in the NFL, which is it's mind-blowing to think about. 50 seasons working as a coach in the NFL.
So who could possibly be the new Patriots head coach? Is there any name out there?
There's a name, Jared Mayo. So he's already on staff right now, and he turned down head coaching interviews last year, which was kind of like a tip of the hat, You think, okay, well, why would you do that? It's everyone's dream. He's a late 30-year-old coach, black man who has an opportunity to go be a head coach. This doesn't make sense, and now it's starting to make sense, right? I think a lot of people are thinking, okay, he's the head coach in waiting for the New England Patriots, which is exciting. Like you said, it's a new time, new era. But I think it's the biggest story, though, once again, is what's Bill going to do? I think the Patriots have a lot of work. Are they going to stick with Mac Jones? All these questions. So I think that there's not you just give Mayo the job and then they're going to be great again. There's a lot of work that needs to happen in New England.
You do think, though, whether it's something outside of football, TV realm, or coaching, Bill Belichick's not just going to disappear after this, right?
No, I think Tom was interesting. Tom Brady said it in his Instagram post where he's like, whatever you decide to do next. And I think that kind of opens it up because a lot of people think, okay, Bill Belichick, he's going to keep coaching. But I do think there's a couple different routes. So if you're a legend like him, you can go Pete Carroll's route, which Coach K did this in basketball. You do all your time, and then you go be an assistant or a special advisor. I don't think that's the route for Bill. I think the TV route, we saw Sean Payton do that, and then go back to coaching. So we'll find out what he does, but I think TV is the one.
All right.
Personally.
To be determined. Corey Robinson, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. Using AI to get out of a jam, traffic jams more precisely, how California is looking to use the technology to improve flow on the roads and make them safer too. That's straight ahead, so stay tuned. Now we want to bring you the future of everything. California is, of course, known for bad traffic. The state estimates 4,000 people are killed in traffic-related incidents there every single year. But California is hoping to get that number all the way down to 0 by 2050 and make roads more efficient with the help of AI.
Public safety and safety in general for Californians is a high priority for this administration. It's our top priority at Caltrans. And so AI has this opportunity of looking at different types of solutions, looking at millions of points of data, quickly analyzing those data points and helping our professionals make better decisions and hopefully getting to that point where we have 0 fatalities.
This month, Caltrans, the state's Department of Transportation, is accepting proposals from tech companies looking for innovative ideas to use generative AI on the road. In some places like Seattle, Google is already piloting a project using AI to improve traffic flow while reducing car emissions. Joining me now is NBC tech correspondent Jake Ward. Jake, how do they hope to implement this, and what could AI improving traffic actually look like for drivers?
Well, Ellison, as you mentioned, this is something of a contest. This is the state of California, the Department of Transportation, basically reaching out to the landscape of AI companies and saying, who's got the best idea? Please bring it to us. Generative AI, the kinds of systems that we've used through something like ChatGPT or Google's Bard, can be trained on more or less any data set and become, conversational in a sense in that kind of data. In this case, Department of Transportation officials are hoping that they can essentially train AI on the enormous amounts of data that traffic lights and traffic monitors might feed into it and create a system that might be able to brainstorm up some better ideas for getting traffic to move better in big cities like LA and all the way down to mid-sized cities like San Francisco, where I am. But the big thing here, of course, Ellison, is traffic fatalities. About 4,000 people a year die on California roads, and the Department of Transportation is very focused on the idea that AI might be able to cut into that number. Here's how they think about it. Have a listen.
Well, one thing that generative AI can do for us is look at all the modes of transportation, analyze the travel times in real time, and provide that information to the consumer or the user of the network to allow them to make the best choice possible for their commute. So it can analyze transit times, rail times, vehicle times, congestion times, all of that. And then the user can determine, today I'm going to take the train, today I'm going to take my car, whatever might be best for them.
So all of this, of course, being a system for looking at what would, for you and I, be an impossible amount of data, right? The general chaos of traffic looks like an unsolvable problem to the human brain, but, when you feed it into a pattern recognition system, the hope here is that it could create some new kinds of order that would make all of us get around better and more safely, Ellison.
And Jake, whenever we talk about AI, there are always some naysayers, some critics, if you will. Sometimes it's because they just don't understand the issue as well as, say, someone like you. Other times there are people who understand the issues very well that raise alarm bells. Are there any concerns as it relates to this situation, the idea of using AI by a state in this manner?
Well, there are basically two big categories of concerns that you hear when it comes to something like this. The first is we don't know if it'll work, right? And it could be that over the course of the kind of experimentation that you would have to do to see if AI can make a dent in something like this, it might make some very bad decisions. We've all seen the ways in which generative AI, makes things up over time. And it could be that it tries to compress, a group of cars into the wrong sized street at the wrong time of day, right? It could make traffic worse, if anything, in the experimental phase. But then the other one, of course, is the fact that you would, in fact, be tracking traffic in a broader sense. There's the privacy concerns about feeding all of the movements of Californians into a central system and how that might be misused. Now, the Department of Transportation says they are not going to misuse it, that it's going to be very carefully siloed off from any other, let's say, a law enforcement agency or anything else. But those two categories of concern always come up when a new AI project like this gets off the ground, Ellison.
Jake Ward, thank you. We appreciate it. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.